Thank you, Professor Sadoway. So we're going to move on to our second keynote session, which we have Mr. Chen, the founder, chairman, and CEO of Renren, the leading real name SNS in China. Before founding Renren, Mr. Chen also founded China Ren, a first-generation SNS in China, and China's #4 portal in 1999. He served as the senior vice president of Sohu.com after two companies merged in 2000. Mr. Chen also holds a master's degree from MIT. This keynote session is co-sponsored by MIT China Forum, which is part of the MIT Greater China Initiative. We will hear more about this initiative on Sunday morning during the closing remarks. So let's welcome Mr. Chen.
After such an entertaining speech, I think it's very difficult to beat it. So I'll probably take a different approach, highly unprepared approach. Hopefully the serendipity will make things happen. This is almost like 20 years ago since I come back to MIT and stay for more than a few days. I arrived yesterday and I had meetings with professors in course 2, my home department, and professors in physics department where we chatted about quantum computing. So, and then in the evening, I met with quite a few startup companies in MIT and in the city of Boston, and our brain is still twisting right now as a result of those intellectual stimulation. And so it's always good to come back to the intellectual home of MIT. And so today I want to talk a little bit how I think about startups, how I think about innovation, because and how I think about your event for the future. Recently I read a book. For those of you who hasn't read it, I highly recommend it. It's a book written by Peter Thiel. The book is called From Zero to One. It's a highly philosophical book talking about, Peter Thiel's philosophies about building a startup, right? So highly recommend it. And there's a couple of ideas I took from that book which made me think. One is that I realized one of the strongest human instincts is mimicking the other person, right? We all heard about keeping up with the Joneses, and whatever your neighbors want, you want it, even though you don't know why, right? You just figured if they want it, I want it. And when you think about from an evolutionary and anthropology standpoint, this makes sense, right? Because let's say in a few thousand years ago, when somebody brought back a wild pig, the entire tribe was running for it to take a piece of it. And you saw people running toward a meal, the mimetic instincts tells you got to go with the crowd, right? You don't want to wait, just go for it, right? So these mimetic instincts are what mainly responsible for human to survive, because assuming the resources in your nature are always scarce. If somebody's going for something, then you probably instinctively wants to go for it. But the future for us, as we enter into knowledge economy, the future are captured by those who are able to invent something new, which basically means that for those people, they have to fight against their mimetic human nature and think about something new and be inventive, be innovative. So these are really, really different human qualities that allowed us to be very good survivors. But going forward, in order to do well, not just surviving, you have to fight against the human nature. So here are a few things I think about how to do that. And the other takeaway from that book was a question that Peter Thiel liked to ask, right? When he was doing interview for some of his companies, he always asked one question. He asked the candidate, say, what is that one thing that you are pretty certain what's that secret that you know that's not widely accepted by the mainstream? Right, so that's an interesting question. I want you to keep thinking about the question, what are the secrets that you know that you think other people do not know, right? Because you think about invention, you think about innovation, you think about betting on the future. It's always those secrets that set you apart, right? If the best knowledge you have about something is exactly the same as everybody around you, then most likely you're not going to generate any alpha, right? To borrow a word in the investment world, you're not going to have extraordinary returns based on efforts because everything you do is sort of like the same as everybody else. So that's an important question that we'll keep revisiting. And I want to talk a little bit about my mentor and one of my biggest investor, SoftBank, Masayoshi Son. He is nowadays very well known in US just in the last year because he did two things. One is that he made an offer to acquire Sprint, which is one of the largest telecom company in US, being a Japan-based telecom carrier. And secondly, one of the company he invested, Alibaba, went public in US recently, and now is featuring a market cap of $300 billion. And SoftBank owns 1/3 of that company. So just based on the ownership of that Alibaba stock, SoftBank has more than $100 billion worth of stock sitting on the balance sheet. And the SoftBank now, by the way, is trading below $100 billion. So you know that it's probably an undervalued company. But to reach where he is, I think what's really unique, I had the opportunity to closely observe Masa because he invested in us. He's one of the biggest shareholders in our company. And I hope one day Renren becomes a $300 billion company and made him famous again. I hope he's right. But I had opportunity to observe Masa and recognize this is something that's really, really important for an entrepreneur, for a highly successful entrepreneur. And that's something I want to share with you. And that something is really against what I said earlier, the basic human nature of being mimetic, being me too, being if you want that something, I want the same thing. He's on the contrary of that human nature. And that what's unique about him is that he's got one singular vision when he was going to Berkeley for undergrad 35 years ago, 40 years ago. He had a singular vision. At that time, I really recall that the IT revolution has just started. And Masa was not a computer science major. I don't think there's a computer science major at that time. It was not even an engineering major. He was an economics major. But he was so impressed with the invention of microchips. He saw that for a few years. He realized that IT revolution is going to be the most important technology revolution in our current era, which is analogous to industrial revolution back in 17th century, right? If you saw somebody around you invented a steam engine, you knew something really important in the context of human history has just happened. And I think being in the Silicon Valley, back in 35, 40 years ago, he had a vantage point of saying, okay, I think this is really, really important, and I want to do something about it. So he made up his mind. Back in 40 years ago, he said, I'm going to build a company, and the company is going to be betting on IT revolution. Whatever is needed for IT revolution that we can do, we're going to do it. But our central thesis is to bet on IT revolution. And that's why a lot of the actions that SoftBank took has brought them here. Now, today is a company more than $100 billion market value, and most likely will keep on growing because they do have the DNA to continue to capture the next available big opportunity. So I think being able to think about the future, I think that's related to how to invent for future. But to do that, you got to first have a vision. And I think if you look back at all current era, and I look back at my personal startup career, I accidentally made 2 bets that in hindsight really was mega trend that's still going very strong. When I graduated MIT in '95, I took a job with a manufacturing company from Alabama, and the company sent me back to China to conduct business there after 1 year going over the different departments of the company, understand the business. So accidentally, I went back to China 20 years ago. And when I look back, I think one of the reasons I'm able to stand here and give a speech to students, it's not because I'm really good or really capable. I think I was just lucky. I had my first break almost 20 years ago to be sent back to China and accidentally just went into the business of the globalization of China, urbanization of China, and the rapid growth of that economy for the past 2 decades. So that was a mega trend that's been very strong for 2 decades and is still going strong. China's economy is still growing at 7% or 6% a year. For very large economies, second largest economy in the world, that's pretty impressive pace. And when you think about how low the average GDP is per capita in China, it's mind-boggling, right? It's like $5,000 per capita GDP versus US probably $50,000. So you still have a 10 times difference between US and China on per capita basis. And you extrapolate a little bit and you say probably that gap's gonna be narrowed and per capita GDP is gonna keep on growing, although they're gonna grow in a slightly different way because past 20 years has been fueled a lot by construction and urbanization, and probably a lot of those potentials already being unleashed. We need to look for something new for growth. And then the second lucky strike for me was internet, right? So, and how I got into the internet was also by accident. When I graduated MIT, I was interviewing for jobs. And one of the interviews took me to San Francisco. And after my interview, I decided to drive by Stanford. And then I look at the campus and I said, this is a nice place. So maybe I'll go back to here for business school or something. And that's exactly what I did 2 years after that. And I accidentally dropped into Silicon Valley back in '97, which also happened to be a hotbed for internet startups and internet revolution. So I accidentally got there. And then, so naturally, when I was thinking about starting a company in '99 when I graduated, I went back to China and started an internet company with 2 of my friends that I met. So when you look back, all these are sort of accidents. So I wasn't a visionary person at all, like Masa. I mean, Masa's different is because when he was 15 years old, he made a 50-year plan for himself. I mean, you can go on and read it, right? Basically, he said, in my 20s, I want to learn all the things I can learn, right? In the 30s, I want to create a company. In the 40s, he said, I want to consolidate a big industry. And in 50s, I forgot, but in 60s, I remember he's going to retire. So I think he is an extraordinary person, as you can see, as a teenager, was already thinking about what's the next few decades is going to be. So I think he belongs to one bracket of people who, despite the fact that they are so far away from, or they're so far away from where the real technology innovation or what's really happening, but because they have the determination, right? Because they have the vision, they will eventually get themselves into some tremendously profitable business and build their own kingdom, right? So he's very different. Not everybody can be like that, but something we can learn. And so when we think about startups, we think about, we are making a lot of investments nowadays in the past few years after we went IPO because we have raised so much money and our operation really doesn't use too much money. We decided to plow back some of the capital into startups and into startups that we understand and we can add value. And nowadays, increasingly, we are thinking about the strategy to do that. It's really about betting, not about betting on a lot of companies, like hundreds, right? We don't do that. We don't have the time to do that. What we're going to do is that we're going to try to think about the future very carefully and identify a few categories where the big innovation can happen, where most importantly, big business value can be created. And we want to own a piece of the leading companies in those categories. So what we call the unicorns, right? The unicorns that emerge from important categories that will be worth at least a few $1 billion when they go public. And so the question for you, and for me as well, is that what are the characteristics of these companies? What's about Google that made it so special? Why is Google so successful? Or why is Facebook successful? Or why was GE successful? Right? These are unicorns in their era, right? In their time. And when I thought about that, I realized one of the necessary conditions, absolute necessary condition, is that these are companies that were early movers on a gigantic trend. Gigantic trend. When Google was started, internet was just happening, right? So there were a lot of data created for the internet. There's no clue how people find the data. And these two PhDs from the database lab at Stanford realized they could leverage on what they know and build an index for it. I was there too. I was there in that year. I met with Larry Page, but I had no clue to what I should be doing because I didn't do research in database. I didn't think about the future that much at that time. And a lot of the success in technology has something to do with serendipity. There's two kinds of success. One is the success built by business people like Masa. Masa is not a technologist, but he's one of the best business people in the world. So no matter what happened, no matter what technology will change, and which technology will be successful, he will eventually find out something and be successful with it. But the other group of companies are companies like Google, Apple, Facebook, who are created by technologists who were doing something really close to what they end up doing, who happen or by purpose or by sheer instance started doing something, becoming an early mover for a gigantic megatrend. Right? So that's something you need to think about. When you want to invent for the future, when you want to, when you want to join a particular industry, a particular company, when you think about how to build a startup for yourself, I think there's one important question. Are you riding on a gigantic wave? Preferably, are you riding on a gigantic wave that has just started, or at least has not yet reached the peak? For example, like 20 years ago, if you are a Chinese graduate student who knows nothing, like me, you just go back to China, right? And that was an early wave. You figure out something to do with China. You don't have any ideas, but you knew China's on the growth trajectory, right? Just like the early days of America, right? There's so much room to grow, and you find a piece of the economy, and you become participant of that high growth economy. But so that's one thing. Recognize what's happening. Be very aware of what's going on in your area, and really identify if that is going to be a mega trend that's happening at least for 1 decade. Because if you're riding on something that's kind of short, right? It's like surfing. The best surfers do not surf at a random wave that's coming. I used to go to Hawaii for vacation, right? I look at my kids surfing, and what they do is like they just go after every wave. right? So sometimes they just ride a few meters and they just fall because the wave is too small. And the wave just break off at close to the shore. But the best surfers, what do? They go further out to the ocean. They are like half a mile away from the seashore, right? And they just stay there. They're waiting for that gigantic wave. And they get on it, they ride on it for like half a mile. That's how you make history. That's how you make a unicorn. So something to keep you thinking about. How do you build a unicorn company? How to build a gigantic success, like a Google, like Facebook? And there's another philosophical point I want to share with you as an entrepreneur and as a startup guy, or for anybody, right? Is to develop a mentality and a personality so that you're ready for success. And that's been called trying to find a way to be prepared to get lucky. For a period of time, at one instant of time, I was thinking, because the company went through up and down, and we sort of get unlucky for a while. And then I was thinking, why? And then I started reading books about luck, right? Two things came out of it. One is I realized that a lot of success has something to do with luck. A lot of it has something to do with how hard you work and how smart you are and everything, right? How prepared you are. But you have to admit that a lot of it has something to do with luck. I attribute part of my success to my randomly showing up in China in '95, and then randomly showing up in Silicon Valley in '97. So those are lucks. But there's something you can do to become more lucky. I really mean it, because I read a few books on how to get lucky. Not being lucky with ladies, but being luckies. You could read something about that too, but I don't read those. You think about how to be lucky as an entrepreneur, as a career person, right? I mean, actually, there are books talking about it. I mean, there's a few things that's common for lucky people who constantly get lucky, who seems to get lucky all the time. These people tend to have quite a few common characteristics. One of them, for example, is general openness. Openness to people, openness for new opportunities. And that sometimes shows up in generosity, right? Somebody asking you for help, if it's not too much trouble, you help them. That's openness, right? And when you do a lot of things like that, good lucks tend to come to you because people want to talk to you. They may want to share a secret they may have. Remember, I talked first about secret. A lot of the wealth are created by accessing to a secret. That secret doesn't have to be yours. The secrets in the world are hiding in two places. One, they're in remote places or industries or businesses that's not accessible by general public. For example, there's one tribe in Africa who has histories and their tribe books talking about the encounter with alien, back in 1,000 years ago. I don't know if it's true or not, but that's a secret. Only they know, right? But majority of the secrets resides in people's mind, right? I know somebody, but I don't tell people, right? I know somebody who might be helpful to you. I know one opportunity that you might be able to take advantage of, but I cannot do anything. So if you open yourself up, right, be more open, be more generous, have the right attitude, then these secrets, you have more access to those secrets because people are more willing to be open to you, right? So building a very good personality that help you become more lucky, I think that's a general advice for everybody, not just entrepreneurs, especially for entrepreneurs, because you need a lot of help. You have uphill battle, right? Your odds of success is close to nothing, right? Statistically, that's the case, especially. Your odds of becoming a unicorn in an important industry is almost nothing when you start something. But some people are able to do that, in the case of Masa, it's like having a really long-term vision, right? Making a bet on a mega trend, and some other people get lucky. And finally, I want to share with you how I think about the mega trends, because I talked to some of the students and they want me to talk about that. And how do you recognize those mega trends? So let me share a few examples. I talk about Masa and his experience with a silicon chip, the invention of silicon chip that was published on IT magazine. When he read that IT magazine, his mind was blowing away. His mind was blowing away, and he decided to bet on IT revolution at that very moment. For everybody, this is epiphany. You read something, you heard something, and to you, that's like a giant, it's like a shock, it's like thunder. You hear what the world is calling. And another example is another entrepreneur called Barry Diller. Barry Diller is the founder CEO of Expedia and Match.com, conglomerates that now holding a lot of the e-commerce businesses. Probably together, it was about $50 billion. Some of the most valuable assets are Expedia and TripAdvisor and Interactive Corp. So he's an entertainer. He is a media person. He used to run Fox News. But then when he retired, when he was thinking about changing profession, so he went visiting a lot of businesses in the country. And one day he was visiting a TV shopping company, I think it's QVC. And he described his experience with that visit. He said, my mind was just boggling. He saw the potential of using TV as an interactive media to sell things, merchandising, right? He just saw that's the way it's coming, interactivity. And basically the keyword for him was interactivity. So he built a company and he named it Interactive Corp. He wants to build the whole company based on one fuzzy feeling that the internet and the TV, the next generation media, will bring a lot of interactive activities between consumers and the business. And guided on that one single intuition, which is really fuzzy, because this is not a company with a very clear vision, okay? It was just a concept, because remember, artists think differently. Artists typically do not have very concise concept on things. They have, oh, this is interesting, this is interactive, right? So, but he went down and got into a lot of businesses that's sort of interactive, right? He started Match.com, which is highly interactive between people, right? And he got into business like, a lot of e-commerce business like Ticketmaster. Most importantly, he acquired Expedia from Microsoft, I think for about $1 billion, right? Now, Expedia, together with TripAdvisor, it's probably was like $30 billion today. So finding that moment, right? I mean, how do you build these moments of epiphany, which is really important about building a great company? I think it has something to do with the mental preparation. And I want to share that with you, my own experience with a particular opportunity that I personally ran into 3 years ago. 3 years ago, I was on my way for vacation to Hawaii. As I said earlier, I love to just sit on the beach and watch people surfing and thinking about how to catch the next wave. And then on the way there, I stopped by Stanford. I was invited to give a speech just like today. And after the speech, a student approached me and said, we started this company that deals with student loan. I said, how do you do it? He said, we basically borrowed $2.5 million from a bunch of alumni from the business school. And we lended that money to a bunch of students in the business school. And we make 2% difference because the alumni, they feel good lending the money to students, and they only want 4% interest rate. And we lend it to students for 6%, and students are happy because the federal loan is 8%. So we make 2%, and everybody's happy. And I said, that's a great idea. So in 5 minutes, I decided to invest in the company, right? And now the company has done $1 billion business. It's the largest private player, one of the largest player in the student loan $1 trillion market, and one of the leaders in the crowdfunding space in US. And they just made it public that they're gonna try to go public next year. I think it's gonna be a really important company. And Renren is one of the largest shareholder in that company. So we really got lucky, But then I asked myself, what did we do to get lucky at that point? And the way we think about it is that, okay, I think it has a lot to do that we had a lot of mental preparation to have that encounter way before 3 years ago. Because as you know that we run social networks, we were never very profitable because, as you know, students in China, unlike you guys, are much poorer. And they don't buy expensive stuff, of course, until lately they started buying iPhone 6 from us because we offer financing. Now they're like just buying a lot of iPhone 6. We'll see if they pay back to us. But we're giving away these iPhones really fast. The business is growing really nicely. But we were thinking about how do we make money from students for a long time, because advertising obviously does not work too well. And because I guess a lot of you goes on Renren, but you never click on ads, right? Even you click, it doesn't pay us because you guys are living in States. And most of the advertisers are in China. And the other way for us to monetize is gaming, right? But most good students, they don't play games. They're too busy, right? They weren't smart. They don't play games. So we don't have very good gaming business either. And that's unfortunately the way a lot of internet companies make money in China. So we were thinking, how do we make money with our user base? And starting from 5 years ago, we were thinking maybe we could provide financial services to our student, right? So 5 years ago, we were already thinking about that. We're thinking, okay, maybe we should issue credit cards, because all these credit card companies love to work with us to issue credit cards to students. And we're thinking, wow, these students are gonna be the white-collar workers in China. You know, there's only 30% of the population that goes to college in the current generation, and they're gonna own probably 90% of the income in that generation in the future. So if we provide financial services, even though when they're 30 years old, they don't come back to Renren, we still have their bank account. They continue to make money for us, right? So we were thinking about that, but as you know, in China, financial services are regulated. So we were thinking so hard, we tried a lot of things trying to get into financial services 5 years ago. We couldn't do it. That's why 3 years ago, when I met with the management team of SoFi, I decided to invest in 5 minutes, because prior to that, we've been thinking about it for 2 years. So as you see, lucky things just do not happen by themselves. You need to put in a lot of work before you get lucky. But putting a lot of work alone is also not enough. You also need to have the right mentality and basically to have the right personality to get lucky, right? So when that student come to me, I was on my way to airport, right? So I could say, so thank you, I'm gonna go to Hawaii, you know, goodbye. But I'm a nice guy. I always, some people come to me, I always talk to them. I don't think that's wasting my time. I want to help people. That's in my human nature. And that's, so I think that plays something to do with that. But I think the last point I want to make, and that has something to do with startup guys thinking about the future, but also has something to do with personal growth. Because a lot of you here are interested in startup, but not every one of them will do a startup. Most of you will not do a startup. Most of you will just get a job. But how do you be happier? How do you become a more accomplished person? Most importantly, how do you accumulate personal wisdom every day, right? So I actually gave a talk on that topic at Stanford, and I think the key point is this, because I'm a financial person as well. I think one of the most important concepts in finance is compound interest rate, right? Who understands compound interest rate? Raise your hand. A lot of you do, right? Why does compound interest rate works? Why does compound interest work? Anybody know? Well, let me quickly come to the answer of that. Basically, the compound interest works because the capital that you gain from previous cycles got plowed back into the investment for the next cycle. Let's say you're making 10% per cycle, right? So after the first cycle, you start with $100, it becomes $110. And starting from the second cycle, you start with $110. And then multiply that by 1.1, you got $121. So that's the actual $1 you made after 2 cycles is one of the key reasons why I have a compound growth, right? So the key is to be able to deploy what you have before into future compounding. Now, you take the same idea to personal growth, not just growth in wealth, but growth in how wise you will be, your personal wisdom. Let's say you can measure your personal wisdom with a number. Your personal wisdom today is 100. How do you make sure 1 year later is 110 and 2 years later is 121? And so on and so forth. So by the time you die, your personal growth, your personal wisdom is 10 times more than your peers. Which your peers are probably accumulating their personal wisdom linearly. They gain $10 every year, right? But you are gaining more than that every year, and the compounding, right? So how do you do that? I thought about it. I realized, it's very simple. It's just like the compound growth in financial sector. You simply take the additional wisdom that you gained in the first year or the first period and apply toward the growth of your wisdom in the next year. That way you can grow your wisdom in a compounding manner. So by the time you die, you grow at 10%, you're probably gonna be 100 times bigger in terms of personal wisdom, which typically equates to success and happiness. So that's one question I want you to think about. How do you grow your personal wisdom in a compounding manner so that you can be more happier, successful, and satisfactory in your life? And that's one question I want you to take away and remember the first time I asked you. And I think that will be one of the key takeaways I want you to take away, which is what are something that you know and other people do not know. And that's one secret that I think highly valuable to me, but I want to share with you. Thank you very much. Yeah, I have time for one or two questions.
We'll take one question.
Thanks for sharing, and I think your person is very good vision. Actually, for the very early user of China website, and according to your speech, I think you now become very successful investor. But some discussion online said you are a good investor rather than good company owner, since the Renren is obviously not as popular as before. So how do you think of this comment, or how do you think your role changed?
Very good question. My answer for you is that I will keep thinking about that question. But one thing for sure, I'll keep on compounding company value. The same way I'll keep on compounding my personal wisdom. I don't care how we do it, but that's the purpose. The purpose and the goal is to compound wisdom and knowledge and company value very fast, as fast as we can. Thank you very much.